Picture this. It's the late 15th century. Europe is buzzing with the spirit of exploration, a thirst for new trade routes, and a hunger for gold and spices. In the heart of this era stands a man with a bold, almost audacious idea. Christopher Columbus. He believed he could reach the rich lands of the East Indies by sailing west across the Atlantic, a concept most scholars of his day deemed not just risky, but outright impossible. For years, Columbus shopped his idea around the royal courts of Europe. He went to Portugal, to Genoa, to Venice, but was met with skepticism and rejection. They thought his calculations were wrong, that the ocean was far too vast. But Columbus was persistent. Finally, he found his patrons in Queen Isabella I and King Ferdinand II of Spain. They were fresh off the Reconquista, the centuries-long campaign to reclaim the Iberian Peninsula, and were eager to expand their influence and find a new source of wealth to rival their Portuguese neighbors. They agreed to fund his daring expedition. So, on August 3, 1492, 3 small ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the flagship, the Santa Maria, set sail from the port of Palos, Spain. Columbus was at the helm, a crew of Abu-Dhabi men at his command. The journey was long and fraught with uncertainty. As weeks turned into a month, then 2, the crew grew restless and fearful. They were sailing into the unknown, further from home than any European had dared to venture before. Supplies were dwindling, and morale was at an all-time low. Mutiny was a real and present danger. Columbus had to use all his skills as a leader, sometimes promising riches, other times making threats, just to keep the expedition from falling apart. Then, in the early morning hours of October 12, 1492, a lookout aboard the Pinta named Rodrigo de Triana shouted the words that would change the world forever. Tierra, tierra, land. They had spotted a small island in what we now know as the Bahamas. Columbus, believing he had reached the outskirts of Asia, called the island San Salvador, meaning Holy Savior. When they went ashore, they didn't find the bustling cities and spice markets of the East Indies they were expecting. Instead, they encountered the Tano people, the indigenous inhabitants of the island. The Tano were a peaceful, agricultural society with their own complex culture, language, and social structures. The initial interactions were a mix of curiosity and confusion. The Tano were fascinated by the Europeans' ships, their clothing, and their metal tools. Columbus, in his journals, described them as gentle and generous, but also saw them through a lens of conquest. He noted their lack of iron weapons, and immediately began thinking about how they could be subjugated and converted to Christianity. He was on a mission for gold and God, and his perspective was shaped by that ambition. Columbus didn't linger. Convinced that mainland Asia was just around the corner, he sailed on, exploring other islands, including a large one he named Hispaniola Today, the island shared by Haiti and the Dominican Republic. It was here that the Santa Maria ran aground on Christmas Eve and had to be abandoned. Using the ship's timbers, his men built a small settlement called La Navidad, leaving behind about 40 men to search for gold, while Columbus returned to Spain to report his findings. This marked the very first European settlement in the Americas. His return to Spain was triumphant. He presented Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand with parrots, plants, and, most significantly, a few captive Tano people. He was hailed as a hero, the man who had opened a new route to the Indies. His discovery sparked a frenzy of excitement across Europe. He was quickly outfitted for a much larger second voyage, this time with 17 ships, and over 1,000 men, including soldiers, priests, and colonists. The era of colonization had begun in earnest, but when Columbus returned to La Navidad on his second voyage, he found the settlement burned to the ground and all the men he'd left behind killed. It was a grim sign of the conflict that was brewing. The sailors had abused the local Taino, leading to violent retaliation. This cycle of violence would only escalate. Columbus and his brothers established new settlements and implemented a brutal system of forced labor. The Taino were forced to mine for gold and work on plantations under horrific conditions. Those who resisted were met with extreme cruelty. This is the dark side of the story, the part that's often glossed over. The arrival of Europeans brought not just new technologies and ideas, but also devastating new diseases. Smallpox, measles, and influenza, to which the indigenous populations had no immunity, swept through the Caribbean and later the mainland Americas like wildfire. Entire communities were wiped out. Within a few decades of Columbus's arrival, the Taino population of Hispaniola, which had been hundreds of thousands, perhaps even millions, was reduced to just a few hundred. It was a demographic catastrophe of unimaginable scale. This pattern was repeated across the Americas as other European powers, England, France, and the Netherlands joined the race for colonies. The Columbian Exchange, the vast transfer of plants, animals, culture, technology, and ideas between the old world and the new had begun. Europe got potatoes, tomatoes, corn, and chocolate, which revolutionized its diet and economy. The Americas got wheat, sugar, horses, and cattle. But it also got diseases that killed millions, and a system of colonization that led to the enslavement and displacement of millions more. Columbus himself did not have a happy ending. His governance of Hispaniola was so disastrous and tyrannical that he was eventually arrested and sent back to Spain, in chains. Although he was later released, he never regained his former prestige or power. He died in 1506, still stubbornly believing he had found a new route to Asia, never fully comprehending the true scale of what he had stumbled upon, two entire continents previously unknown to Europeans. So, how should we remember Christopher Columbus today? He was undeniably a skilled and determined navigator whose voyages connected to separate worlds. But he was also a man who initiated a brutal chapter of conquest, exploitation, and genocide. His legacy is complex and deeply controversial. For centuries, he was celebrated as a heroic discoverer. But today, many see him as a symbol of the immense suffering inflicted upon the indigenous peoples of the Americas. The story of 1492 isn't just about one man or one voyage. It's about a pivotal moment that reshaped the entire globe, with consequences that we are still living with today. It challenges us to look at history from multiple perspectives, and to understand that the dawn of one era was often the twilight of another. It's a powerful reminder that history is rarely a simple story of heroes and villains, but a complex tapestry woven with threads of courage, cruelty, discovery, and destruction. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this journey into the past insightful, please hit that like button, and subscribe for more deep dives into history. See you next time.